please welcome to the stage Brenda Oliver.
Good afternoon. Oh, I do have dispensation that I can remove my mask up here as long as we're 6 feet apart. And I want to share with you what we're going to try to accomplish today. The purpose of the Candidates Forum is to publicly engage the candidates for Missouri Realtors Leadership about their views, to educate members and help them reach their own informed decision, and to promote member participation in strengthening involvement in leadership positions in general. So we're going to have two sets of candidates. We're going to start today with the NAR Director Candidates. We have one director position that is expiring, so the winner of these two candidates in the vote we have Friday morning will be a new NAR Director. It's possible when we get our numbers in July that we may get a second director. However, that person may be allocated from a large board. We won't know until all that shakes out. But if it is an outstate director, then the second vote getter or the second person that's with us today on the dais will take that second director's position. So I'm going to welcome to the stage our two candidates for NAR Director, and they are Michael Jakes from the Greater Springfield Association and Sean Moore from the Columbia Association. Each of these candidates will have 90 seconds to give an opening remark, and then we have some prepared questions that they have been given that came from our leadership team, and they'll have 60 seconds each to answer those questions. And because of alphabetical order, we're going to start with Michael Jakes, and then they'll have 90 seconds for a closing remark when we finish, and we'll allocate 30 minutes to them.
You're saying 90, not 9, is that right? For a second, I thought you said 9 seconds, and I thought,
90.
Oh 90. There we go. Okay, good. Thank you.
Kara, right down here, will have a little card that says, "Shut up,"
there we go.
when you have reached your limit.
We can hardly see you, to be honest. I mean, we cannot see anybody.
We can read the shut up, though, real well. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's nice.
So, Michael,
Ma'am.
I would invite you to give us a little overview of what you want to tell us about Michael Jakes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to say, please don't hold my CEO against me, especially since my last CEO is here, and he's the one I hired most recently, and now the new. So anyway, don't hold my new CEO against me. But Michael Jakes, wow, where do you start with that guy? I didn't realize a lot of people didn't know who my parents were. My dad's been an NAR director and state director and past board president of Springfield way back when there were MLS books and there was no internet. Way back then. He's a Realtor Emeritus now, which means he served his 40 years and been involved at every level. And I say that because of the number of years that he's been in it. My mom is starting her 39th year as a Realtor this year. Both my brother and sister, our whole family, that's our company, the Jakes Company. That's who we are. And literally, that's where 121 years. I added it up the other day. I thought, that's a lot of years, but it's a lot of pressure. I'm glad some of you don't recognize or understand what that pressure is about to follow footsteps like that. My dad has a sterling reputation in Springfield for doing things right and well, and boy, that means you can't make many mistakes. And if you do, everybody knows about it. It's a small town feel, which again, it's a good thing and a bad thing, but that's part of who Michael Jakes is trying to follow in footsteps and live up to a great heritage and legacy that I've been given and very thankful for. Yeah, that's who Michael Jakes is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sean, can we have your elevator speech?
Sure. What a year, you know? What a year that 2020 ended up being. For me, it was a year of balance. And for the first time, this will be my 17th year in the industry, I had the best work-life balance I've ever had. More focused. Raise your hand if it was your best year in your career. I'm hearing that across the country. and really helped me prioritize my future and where I want to be and what I want to do. My triplets, they flee the nest in 18 months. My wife and I are freaking out. Today was their first day back in school, and the excitement this morning at the breakfast table was, as I posted on Facebook, contagious. But my story moving forward is the freedom, the liberty, and the choice to serve, to give back. The financial success that this business provides those of us who figure it out and work hard is not enough to fill my heart. It's the giving back, it's the sharing my expertise. I was talking to some agents in the back of the room. I've rewritten my speeches, I've rewritten my talks, I've rewritten my education because the industry has fundamentally changed in the last 10 months and we are not going backwards. So we have got to figure out the new demands of our consumers, and my team and I had a wonderful year, and we are gearing up to have an even bigger year this year. And I just want to serve you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We're very fortunate to have two such qualified people seeking the office of NAR Director. Michael, as a state association, we're kind of proud that we were so successful with our emerging issues forum and how that's become such a staple for us and feeds into the strategic planning committee and helps us really take action on the items that are forefront for us. With that in mind, what do you think is one issue that NAR should be more focused on as far as moving into the future?
That's a bit of a tricky question to answer because I don't want it to come across as thinking I know the answer and I have all these great ideas or I'm a know-it-all or something like that. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm pointing fingers and NAR is not doing a good job. Quite the opposite. NAR is so impressive when they do something. You know, they seek out the industry experts, and like the NAR video that we just connected with Fairhaven there, the people that put that together was an amazing think tank of people in that social sciences that helped create that. And like, you know, anything NAR does, it's just top notch, and it's hard to think of what affects everybody in our industry. And of course, you can't fix stupid, but NAR tried to with C2EX endorsement, and that program, tried to fix that and tried to help raise the level and raise, so that they tried to fix stupid and have made good attempts at that, and now they're trying to take on the issue of discrimination and fair housing and really hitting that head on. And if you haven't gone to fairhaven.realtor, I encourage you, please do that. And I challenge you to do that because, again, it's a phenomenal program, and that's something that's going to affect all of us. That's something that can change our culture. If we'll be the light to push out that darkness, if we'll be the light to show people how to do it, people should be looking to realtors for that. That's, yeah.
Sean, I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell us, what do you think is the one issue that NAR should be focused on that will impact the largest number of realtors?
I guess I can answer that question by restating the question. NAR's sole focus should be its membership. We are their consumer. We are who they exist for, and we are who they serve. And I agree with what Michael said. Nobody in this room, our think tank and our mindset, it's already on the forefront at the NAR level. I was fortunate enough to serve you and all 1.4 million members for last year as the chairperson for strategic planning for NAR. And getting that assignment and that appointment was amazing, and the journey was amazing. It was a long journey. And the goals and the directives of the committee that I chaired last year fundamentally was upheaved. And we fundamentally had to completely switch what we were doing because of the change that happened. And that we have started a new journey that I'm not at liberty to discuss here today, but it was fun to be a part of that, even though my journey, I serve one more year this year. I'll serve as a past chair. But NAR is to serve us and serve whatever is prevalent, and I think they do a good job.
So can you tell us when that strategic plan will be unveiled? You've teased us here now.
Yeah, they're shooting for the major convention this fall in San Diego.
Okay. Michael, you've served as an NAR director before. If you're elected this time, how will this term be different, or how will it be the same?
I don't know that it would be any different in terms of my focus or my goal, because I went the first time as a director to serve you, and that's what I've been doing and enjoyed doing the last 7 years, and that's certainly not going to change. I don't ever want that to change. That's part and parcel of who I am, is I just enjoy serving people and helping find ways to make us better and make us smarter and help us overcome the challenges and whatever they may be. And being an NAR director, learning from people from around the state and being able to take some ideas back home, bring them back here, back to my local board. Now, I do want to say, hopefully, I'm a little smarter than I was in 2019 as an NAR director. I know what a Zoom meeting is now. I know what a global pandemic looks like and how that affects everyday life of everyday people. So I'd like to think I'm a little smarter, a little wiser, but at the same time, my focus hasn't changed. I still think the world of you all and love you all, and that'll always stay constant.
Hey, Sean, tell us what you think might be different this time around. How long have you served as NAR director?
Me or Michael?
I thought you had served before.
Yes.
Sean.
Okay. So I think if you in the room and those at home choose to reelect me, my term ended. It was my first term, 3-year term, and I spent the past 3 years building relationships. Serving as an NAR director got me introduced to the leadership team, and that's what got me the appointment as the chair of strategic thinking or planning at NAR. And those relationships, what I'm most excited about for if you choose to reelect me and give me 3 more years, is the relationships I was able to build at the top of the top, at the incoming leadership. I'm on a first name basis with the heads of the heads. I mean, we text, we call, we send each other jokes. And as you all know that have been in the room a long time, I mean, I'm new to this. I started my journey with Missouri Realtors in 2010. So this is my 11th year, and it's taken a decade to get to this level, to build these connections, and to serve at an extremely high level where you can have influence and power and bring the voice of Missouri to the national level.
Thank you. Back to Michael. We all know that you're very qualified. We believe that you are dedicated and willing to serve. What was the driving force or the passion behind your decision to submit your application for this important position?
I came across a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, and it said, "Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a better person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in." And as I was reviewing, filling out my honors society and reviewing the year and looking forward to next year and seeing how all I've been involved and all the commitments and chairs and things that I've got going now and then next year and at the NAR level, I realize I can't stop now. You all have invested too much in me. 7 years ago, my very first JBC, I was the guy in the back of the Southern District trying to figure out what happened, what's going on here. This is an amazing group of people, and here I am with the State Leadership Academy and all the different ways that you all have invested in me and voted for me this far. You know, I want to be the one that's serving humanity and making us greater. Again, whether you elect me or not, I'm going to keep going to NAR. I'll keep being on NAR committees. I'll keep being involved here. I just love being a part of this group, and you're just the best thing I can think to be doing with my time, and that's why I'd love to have your vote.
Sean, I want to know about your passion and the driving force in making the decision to run one more time.
First and foremost, I'm very passionate about everything that I do, and I do it at a level, I can't do it at 150% or less in everything that I do. When it comes to giving back and association involvement and leadership, every year I like to come up with a little hashtag or a tagline that is going to be the focus or the summary of my journey that year and all things that I do. And with all that we've been through the last 10 months, 12 months, for this year, the motto, for me and in my heart and in my soul is fund the fun in service to others. We do what we do every day to make a living, but once you have that living, give back to others. And that's what I'm most excited about. I'm at a position at a high level to where I can give back at a level I've never been able to before.
Very good. Well, I feel like all of your comments have been very aspirational, so to ask for another 90-second closing to make sure you get to include something you may have left out will be hard to do. But I'm going to let Mike go first. Tell us, just give us your closing remarks.
Yeah, how do you wrap it up? I mean, again, with the family history that I have in real estate, that's real estate life is all I've known. I love the real estate life. It's again, for the most part, it's all I've ever known. I've known it here. I started it in Guam when my wife and I were there, and so I know what it looks like in a very diverse community, and I know what it looks like here, and I love it. Wherever it is, I love the power that realtors have. And I would love to be able to be your representative, for one of your NAR directors, because I think your NAR director needs to be someone that's very plugged in their local board at this level, as well as at the NAR level. And again, I've checked off all those boxes, and I don't know how better to just say, if you'll keep voting for me, I'll keep serving you. If you don't vote for me, I'll keep serving you. It's okay. I'm not going to take it personal, because I just love you all too much. I love you all too much not to be involved and not to chair committees or serve on PAGs or just help in any way I can. I just love helping people. And again, to take back to another NAR quote, another Martin Luther King Jr. quote, he says, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And when I heard Sean was running and he was the only one, I thought, boy, that's a tough, I'm going to go back to the 6 candidates for 2 spots. That might be a little easier. But then I thought, you know, you all have given too much, and I don't want to be the one that's silent and say, well, I'll just step out. I'll just keep serving quietly on the side. I want to give you a choice to make your voice heard. I don't want you to be silent and not have a choice in this. So hopefully I'm the choice you pick. Hopefully tomorrow you'll say, I like Mike for
Thank
NAR
you,
director.
Michael.
One of my favorite quotes, one of my other favorite quotes is, "A true expert does only one thing, and that is what they are an expert at. Everything else they choose not to do, they delegate or they train or teach others to do." I have spent 11 years to get to right here, right now. My children are leaving in a year. My wife and I are going to be empty nesters. We're on a new venture. We're thinking about relocating to the country and getting out of the city and into the country, just like the rest of the world, right, because of COVID. But when it comes to this position, I can't wait to travel with my wife because the kids are gone and serve at a higher level and bring her into the fold of the association. She's been at home being a mom, so that's important. Timing is important. And like I said in the previous questions, I spent a lot of time, energy, and effort to get to this level, to serve at a level I've never been able to serve at.
Well, I want to thank these candidates for opening their hearts to us today, and I want to assure all of you that you're going to have the opportunity to talk to them one-on-one right after we interview our treasurer candidates. We're going to have just a little bit of time to mingle in the group, so be thinking about a question that you can ask these 2 guys face-to-face that might help you make your final decision how you're going to vote Friday morning. So, gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Can we
Thank
say a
you.
big thank you to everybody online? Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Now, we're going to ask to come to the stage our 2 candidates for the position of Missouri Realtors Treasurer-elect, and they are, or 2022 Treasurer, I guess is the correct title for what we're going to vote on, and they are Donnie Allen from Ozark Gateway Association, is that the right name of your group? And Derek Schriever from Franklin County Board. And Derek, we do have dispensation to remove your mask now that you're here, if you like. So, same format that we had for the last candidates, where Kara right down here is the one with the timer, and she'll just say stop when you've used up your 60 seconds or your 90 seconds. But we're going to open it up with just a generic opening comment. And as the rules tell us, we're going to go alphabetically. So Donnie gets the advantage of speaking first.
All right, well, I'm running for treasurer-elect for 2021, and I'm asking for your support and for your vote. I began my real estate career in 1996 when I moved back to Joplin, Missouri from Oklahoma. And my wife and I had began looking for homes, and we just couldn't find the right property. And we spent a lot of time with real estate agents, and you know, I just wanted to know what they did and why they did what they did, what, you know, the words they used, and it was all over my head, and I wanted to be an informed consumer, and so I knew a friend who was going to take the real estate class, and I decided to jump into that class just so I would know what they were talking about. And it turns out, as I learned more and more every night, I would go home and I would say, you know what, I think I can do this. I believe I can do this. And so it became my passion, and I launched my career in 1996. In 2002, I got my broker's license, and I was hired by a large independent company in Joplin to be a manager, broker, trainer. And then in 2006, I opened my own real estate company. And so my career has had many successes, including Leadership Academy in 2006 and NAR Leadership Academy in 2017. And so I believe I've built a resume that is certainly strong enough, and certainly some leadership opportunities and skills that I believe I would be a good candidate for you.
Thank you. Derek, can we have 90 seconds to tell us about you?
Yes, I sure can. So first of all, thanks for all attending in person as well as virtually. So my background, and I'm just going to kind of run through what I talked about on the campaign trail. So I joined real estate in 2006, having just graduated college. I joined my mother's team, who had built her career to a point where she needed some assistance. So I jumped in and said, I'll help you as long as I get to continue my academics. So the negotiation was I'd get to participate in graduate school. So I went to UMSL while I worked as a non-licensed assistant. In 2010, I decided to get my license against my mom's recommendation. Most of my life, I never thought I would actually be a realtor. And as I got involved in the industry, I realized how important we really are to the entire nation and to our communities. And so over that time, I realized, and encouraged by many people in this room and joining us digitally, to continue my progression of joining my local board, working as a director. That group said, maybe you should go to the state meetings. And so I did that, and sure enough, I impressed, I guess, well enough that people continued to ask me to serve. And I've had the opportunity to serve alongside Brenda in the Strategic Planning Committee. And from there, I began my tenancy as a member of the Finance and Budget Committee, which I believe really puts me in a position to be the right choice here for treasurer, because I've been a part of Finance and Budget for going on 6 years now, and I've really loved being a part of that group. And I've been appointed by multiple presidents, and I've also worked alongside both Emily Miller and Jesse Jordan, so I do feel I'm qualified for the position.
Thank you, Derek. Donnie, realtors come in all shapes, sizes, ages, and demographic backgrounds. You're asking to be our representative on the leadership team. So if I were a brand new realtor, what would you do for me once you become part of the leadership team?
Man, I love that question. I love new real estate agents, and I remember sitting in that chair the very first time I made it up to Missouri Realtors as a new agent in 1999, and I remember first, I wasn't on a committee, I was on like a technology task force or something like that. So I remember being there, and I didn't have the benefit of a AE leading me around or a mentor at that time. So I remember how scary it can be sometimes when you're new, right? And you're here by yourself and you don't know if it's okay to sit down at this table or this chair or with these people. And so I love the question because I'm passionate about new agents and their success, and I just want to make sure that we wrap those people up and reach out to them. What I would do, what you could expect from me, is basically the mission of not only this current leadership team, but Missouri Realtors in general, to lead, to advocate, and engage. In fact, many of you, there were 330 some odd directors, I believe. I sent out a message to each and every one of you, and if you didn't get my friend on Facebook, many of you probably did. I'm trying to reach out to all of you and find you and invite you into a conversation. So that's what you can expect from me.
Thank you. Derek, tell us what you're going to do for me, the brand-new member, if you're part of the leadership team.
So specifically, I would mention and begin talking about what NAR did this past year with the Right Tools Right Now. I think that type of program was a wonderful asset that was provided to all members, and I also think it was very beneficial to the new agents specifically. They have such an abundance of a plethora of opportunities and options, through that system, and I highly recommend, if you haven't looked into it, to check that out. Simultaneously, our state association has been doing wonderful things, including the Video Vault, which came out of the Communications Output Group, and I believe that particular program is going to be something that we need to drive home to new member orientations and things like that across the state at our local boards to make sure that they're aware and that those videos can enhance someone's career and that they're available at the right time. Additionally, for new members, I'm very proud of our risk management group and the wonderful work they did in getting the COVID forms out within such a wonderful timeline that they impacted us this year. So I just think our state has been doing things, and I want to continue that progress.
And Derek, I would like for you to spell plethora. Never mind. I bet he can. Donnie, can you give us an example of a time when you served in a leadership role, maybe in your local association, where events required you to step up, turn the tide, and guide the group into a new direction?
So probably several choices there, but the one that probably was the most impactful for me in that leadership role that I had as a broker, manager, trainer at a company, I had a large group of realtors who I felt responsible for as a mentor and a trainer and a teacher, and those agents were searching for a different culture, a different environment, and after listening to some of their concerns and desires for a long time, probably a couple of years, I just decided that the only way I could resolve that would be to open my own company. So I did do that. In 2006, I opened my own real estate company and took many of those agents with me. So the change was, if we don't like where we are, let's go do something about it. Let's do something different, and we did. I opened an office in Joplin with 3 partners and 5 agents. Today I have over 190 agents, and last year we closed over 3,200 properties and 500 and some odd million, 500 million in volume. So it just goes to show you that when people are happy and the environment is good and the culture is good, it just works.
Thanks.
And to carry on with that, the idea of culture in your organization is crucial. And so my topic would be, in 2015, our local board lost our AE after a 20-year period of her serving our association. And in that moment, I was a volunteer leader as a board of director, and we had to scramble, to be frank, and to validate and make sure that all the state filings were in place, all the finances were in good order, and then from there, I immediately started moving into my officer positions there at the local board, and based on that, I wrapped up my past president last year, and I was very honored and diligent in a way. I feel like I left a lasting impression because we went back through and reorganized our committee structure. And so at one point this year, last year, I was looking through and checked our committee structure, and we required 105 or more than 105 members. We have a 350-member board. So obviously we were stretching ourselves pretty thin, and so we did a complete restructure. We looked at Missouri Realtors 02 structure and took some points that we thought were appropriate and applied them to our local association to have just 75 required members moving forward.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, last question. And it's a 2-part question. Donnie, tell me what's the toughest decision you've had to make in the last year, and why was it tough?
The toughest decision I've made in the last year was to do this, was to run for treasurer. Probably the single greatest obstacle was I was going to have to run against a couple of friends of mine. Derek and I have literally had dinner and drinks together, and we hang out and we enjoy each other. So to run against a friend is difficult, but what I knew was Missouri Realtors would benefit from that choice, right? But for me, it's a conversation that I've been having for a long time. I had so many things, in my early career, I wanted to get my career on track and get things going so that I could dedicate the time, energy, and effort that it takes, that it requires. In 2006, I opened my own office. In 2011, we had the big tornado, and it took 4 years to put everything back. A couple of years after that, my wife had a tumor. She was on chemotherapy for a couple of years, and I needed to be a caregiver, and so I spent that time. And so the things just kept popping up and giving me challenges, and so it finally aligned and now became the right time for me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Eric.
Similarly, it wasn't necessarily the decision to run for this position, it was the timing of a campaign. For one, I'm not a big self-promoter. It's kind of uncomfortable for me, to be completely honest, to toot my own horn. But from there, it was the pandemic. The reality of me trying to self-promote amidst this grave situation we're in called the pandemic. It was uncomfortable, even more so. And so if you look back, I think, well, maybe I should have done this or that. But in reality, I'm very happy with the way my campaign progressed. I believe we adapted to the constant changes. At one point, I was catering to a large group, and suddenly that voting base was different, and so I had to adapt to that. Going from in-person only to a virtual, to a hybrid, all those sorts of things presented challenges to me, and I believe I overcame them and showed that adaptability and change is a part of my skill set, and I'm prepared to see what Missouri Realtors offers, and I'd be glad to adapt and change and improve this association like I have my local.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, time for a little closing remarks. If you thought, oops, I forgot to talk about that, this is your opportunity. And Donnie, you're going to have the floor.
I had a candidate reception last night and invited everyone who would be voting for drinks. And I really wanted to take an opportunity to speak to each and every person there. But what happened was, you get to talking with someone and you want to stay laser focused and be in the moment and answer their questions and have that conversation without looking around. So if I missed you, I really apologize. I meant to speak with every one of you last night, but I appreciate you coming. As I think back, when I first saw my first Missouri Realtors meeting, I was just in awe, right? I believe that, we've had some great presidents in the past, and I want to be a part of that fabric. I think about people who've inspired me, the Bruce Eites, the Richard Mendenhall, the Elizabeth Mendenhall, the Keatings, and many others, the Gherkins, who have always supported me and encouraged me to run at some point. And I often refer or think about the way that geese fly, right? There's always a lead goose, and they're flapping their wings, and they're breaking the air so that everyone can move along further, faster. But when they get tired, they go to the back and everyone else takes their turn. And so what I'm asking for, what I'm putting out there is, I'm asking for my turn. I would like to represent you. I want to be president. And Richard Mendenhall said it best, leaders lead. And I want to take my term as your leader.
Thank you. Derek, I'm going to give you the opportunity to just sum up what you think we need to know.
Yeah, so along the campaign trail, I got to have some wonderful conversations. I've been campaigning now for 10 months, competing against 3 different friends and opponents, and so I've had to adapt to that a little bit as well. And what I wanted to make sure I convey is that I believe I'm the right person at the right time. My skill set and my involvement at NAR is focused on consumer communications, and I believe that making sure that the brand Realtor, the brand Missouri Realtors, is known to every consumer, that we are crucial to the transactions, we are crucial to real estate industry, but amazingly, we are also crucial to the nation's economy. The housing market is absolutely crucial. And I come with a background of economics, I come with a background of political science, and I believe that the right combination and the right conversations across our state will make sure our housing industry is booming and going well. And I think that I bring a skill set that is a little different than Donnie's, and I do think that it's the right time for me. Not necessarily, I've been on a leadership trajectory in some ways, and this was my chance to run, but I also believe that I'm the right fit for the next 4 years and the changes that are going to be happening across our industry and across our country, and I believe that I'm the right fit. And so I've championed and kind of, as I campaigned, said that I wanted to earn your vote. So I started my communications in November asking for the opportunity to earn your vote. I'm not assuming anyone is voting for me, but I do want, at some point I have to ask the question, and tomorrow I will do that. But as of right now, have a conversation with me, and I still hope to earn your vote.
Well, I think I can speak for most of you in this room. It's wonderful to have such dedicated potential leaders, that you're already leaders, but people that are willing to step up and serve the organization. So as I end the candidates forum, I think we're going to have the opportunity for you to talk to all 4 of these gentlemen in the room. John, how long before emerging issues start?
It starts at 3:15.
And what time is it now?
2:38.
Oh, so we have 17 minutes, right?
No.
Oh, we got a whole lot of time.
Half hour plus.
So we have 30 minutes to meet and greet, so try not to monopolize any one of them, but if you've got a burning question that their comments brought up to you, we wanted to let you have the opportunity to speak to them. So I'm going to say good luck and thank you for your
Thank you.
willingness to serve.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
answer a few of those while we're here today. First up, we have Katie Johnson, our General Counsel and Chief Member Experience Officer for the National Association of Realtors. As General Counsel, she is responsible for assuring that the programs and policies and activities of NAR are in compliance with the law. She is also responsible for defending the association against legal challenges and initiating legislation to protect and preserve association assets and policies. As NAR's Chief Member Experience Officer, she leads initiatives to enhance member engagement and satisfaction through delivery of trusted knowledge, resources, and experiences that elevate member success and professionalism. Katie, our industry has been faced with some challenges recently. Anything from the antitrust case followed by the Department of Justice to the ongoing class action lawsuits. We really do appreciate you for joining us today and providing us with some insights and updates. So here, I'd like to welcome Katie Johnson.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting and inviting our colleagues for this round robin. I hope that we can provide you some really useful information and takeaways. I also want to thank you for doing that survey and sharing the survey results for us. I did take a look, and when you were asked what is the number one thing that you believe will have the greatest impact on your business in 2021, my review of the results, I think it was obvious that listing inventory was the biggest concern of this group, perhaps followed closely by the economy and the COVID impact, that how the COVID will impact the economy. I suspect, but don't know for sure, that my colleague, Dr. Jessica Lautz, is going to address some of those issues for you. I also noticed that politics and laws and new laws and regulations was a concern, and perhaps Ryan can shed some light on that. To a lesser degree, some of you were concerned about competition in the space, and there was a couple mentions of realtor rights, so I do hope to address some of those concerns for you. But I do want to say that there was one response in that survey that blew me away. That was a really great response. So in response to the question of what is the number one thing that you believe will have the greatest impact on your business, this person said quite simply, me. Which was so obvious and so cool and is such a good perspective, because it's absolutely true. It is completely within your control and your domain to determine your business success and impact that you will have in growing your business this year. We are here to support you in your efforts. So let me start with the Department of Justice settlement, as mentioned in the intro. And you have likely heard that in mid-November, NAR and the Department of Justice reached a settlement related to questions raised by the Department of Justice about our MLS system and about commissions generally. This settlement will resolve the DOJ's questions, and it also requires NAR to make certain rule changes. As you know, NAR's rules, your business practices, especially, have always sought to create a competitive and efficient market, ultimately for the benefit of home buyers and sellers. So we view these rule changes that I'm going to discuss with you today and as bolstering that effort, as supporting and more explicitly stating what is already the spirit and intent of NAR's Code of Ethics and MLS rules. So I'm going to briefly go over each of the rule changes with a little more specificity, but I want to first take a moment to highlight these outcomes. So to be clear, no immediate action is required. There are a number of steps that need to take place before any of the rule changes will go into effect. So for example, the court has to approve the final judgment. What you've seen, what we've made available on our website, is a proposed final judgment. Right now, we are negotiating with the Department of Justice on the final wording of any rule changes. And so the Department of Justice will have to agree before we can even present those to the Board of Directors. And of course, the court has to agree as well. So we have some time before any action must be taken. Also, we strongly disagree with how the DOJ characterized our rules and policies in the complaint. If you happen to read it or to read a summary, we admit no liability, no wrongdoing. We think the DOJ has mischaracterized how the system works for the benefit of home buyers and sellers. But also notably, we're not required to pay any fines or fees in settling this matter. We again think that this is a positive outcome because the rules being recommended, if not required, by the Department of Justice, the rule changes really do support existing rules, policies, and intent, as I'm going to discuss here in a moment. So there are 4 rules at issue. And first rule is going to require the disclosure of commissions. And here we proposed to the Department of Justice that we adopt a new MLS policy statement that accomplishes a few things. First, the policy statement is going to prohibit MLSs from restricting or discouraging participants and subscribers from publishing and displaying the offer of compensation. So currently, if your MLS is owned by a realtor association, and if the MLS marks that field as confidential, it can no longer be marked or identified as a confidential field. Furthermore, because the MLS can't prohibit or discourage display, the MLS will actually have to proactively display the offer of compensation in their consumer-facing vehicles. So that would be a public-facing website if the MLS has it, or certainly the listing detail pages that the MLS provides for the consumer's view and benefit. Those sources will now display the offer of compensation. Brokers and agents will have, and MLS participants generally, will have an obligation to make sure their clients know what the offer of compensation is on a property before they make an offer on that property. So here, again, the focus is on getting the information to the people who need to know it. And the easiest way for a member to satisfy that requirement would be to use the listing detail pages that the MLS produces, since now it'll have that information on it. They could also desire to post it on their own websites and to include it in their IDX displays if they so choose. As a way of making sure they're complying with this obligation of ensuring that the consumer understands what the offer of compensation is. And the rule that we've proposed to the DOJ would allow MLSs to require a disclaimer to be included in that display. And so the disclaimer would very clearly state that that is an offer being made only to other MLS participants, and that is the amount that a listing broker is willing to pay another MLS participant who brings a ready, willing, and able buyer. This piece of information being necessary to help consumers and non-participants understand what that offer number actually means. The second rule change under the rules, under the DOJ settlement, is a prohibition on advertising services as free. So again, the buyer brokerage services are not free. The amount of compensation paid from a listing broker to a buyer's representative is calculated into the transaction costs, and so therefore, no broker is working for free in this scenario. So they cannot say that they are working for free. But you may already think, we're already prohibited from saying that we're working from free if we're getting compensation from any source, because Standard of Practice 12.1 does prohibit that. Standard of Practice 12.1 says you can only advertise your services as free if you are not being compensated from any other source. That is intended to apply to those of you who wish to give complimentary CMAs, free tools or consulting services prior to getting the client. So this would be your prospecting activity. But once you have a client, you cannot tell a client that your services in the transaction are free to the client. And so we are recommending here just a very simple statement in MLS policy, as well as amending that SOP 12.1 that simply says a realtor cannot advertise their services to a client in a real estate transaction as being free or available at no cost. The third rule change is a prohibition on filtering listings that consumers receive. So I said that intentionally because, again, the focus is on what information is the consumer receiving from the source being the MLS or the participant or subscriber. And this rule change will prohibit MLSs, participants and subscribers, from the ability to restrict the listings that a consumer receives based on the offer of compensation being made or based on the name of the listing broker or agent. Those rule changes are intended to address the DOJ's perception that some agents won't even tell their clients that certain homes are available, even though they match the client's desires and criteria, but they don't offer as much compensation as the listing broker wants to pay or wants to receive. So again, this is just bolstering an existing duty for all realtors. Realtors have the duty to act in the best interest of their client, Article 1. And so that includes providing information on all properties that might fit the client's needs. And when there is a property that fits the client's criteria, but doesn't offer the amount of compensation that you've agreed to with the buyer in your buyer representation agreement, so I'll repeat that you've agreed to with the buyer in your buyer representation agreement. If you're not using buyer representation agreements, please start using buyer representation agreements for a whole host of positive benefits to you. Then you have that conversation with the client and say, if you like this home, you're going to be on the hook for this amount of money. So that's already a requirement. This rule would say that the MLS can't have functionality that limits the properties available to the consumers based on those two criteria. And certainly the client representatives can't limit the properties based on that criteria. Now, when I shared this rule initially, I got really good feedback. So I'll just pause there too and say your feedback is welcome. How your realistic real life application of these rules is very important to us. So my email is kjohnson@nar.realtor. You can send me any feedback about these or other MLS issues that you may have. And some of the feedback we got was that brokers here did use that functionality, especially to search by the name of a broker or the name of an agent, for their back office purposes, for legitimate business reasons of wanting to know who the top producers are, who's selling the most in a certain time period, who's selling the most in a certain market. That is okay, and that will continue to be acceptable because, again, that has nothing to do with the consumer. The focus here is on the information that the consumer receives. Okay, and the final rule is about lockbox access. And this rule makes people clench and get very nervous. And I understand why. And I think and I hope that we've addressed many of the concerns that folks have in the rule as I am about to explain it. So the DOJ, the order says that, MLSs and associations must provide lockbox access to any licensee with the seller's permission. So said differently, you cannot require membership in an MLS or association in order to access a lockbox for a specific listing. And so there's a whole host of questions and issues around that we received in the feedback, which was tremendously helpful. First was about safety. How do we ensure that the individual requesting access is who they say they are and is competent, at least as competent as Realtor members, to enter the home? Well, pursuant to the draft that we provided to the Department of Justice, it would be acceptable for the lockbox provider, typically an association or MLS, to require the same safety precautions that they require of all others members accessing the lockbox. So, for example, if the association requires a driver's license to be submitted, a social security number to be given. Perhaps the association conducts its own background check. I know in many states the state does that, but I've been told that some associations do that as well. So whatever security precautions or security measures you're taking for Realtor members or MLS participants, you certainly should be able to take the same precautions for non-members. And then the next logical question is, wow, that's a lot of administration around this. Can we charge? Yes, you should be able to charge a reasonable fee for accessing the lockbox. If you charge your members for that access, then the amount that you charge non-members should not be more than that amount. If you don't specifically call out how much you charge members for that access, then you should work with your attorney or accountant to determine the proper amount that's reasonable and not at risk of violating antitrust laws, meaning it's not overly inflated, such as to really be encouraging membership in the organization itself. Also, as a result of these rules, the current lockbox policy allows for temporary access to be optional, temporary codes to be optional. The change will require that temporary codes be available, again, pursuant to the conditions that we're discussing right now. And the good news is that both Supra and SentryLock have that functionality today, so they can turn it on for you at your request. The last issue and concern that very understandable concern that we received was regards to how do you hold non-members responsible for adhering to the rules for finding out the listing, adhering to the lockbox access rules and adhering to the penalties and sanctions for not following the rules. Well, it should be acceptable for the provider to also require that the recipient of a lockbox key execute a lockbox lease agreement. That is required of all Realtor members and MLS participants. So it should equally and similarly be required of non-members as well. The last point I want to make is that the individual must be licensed in the state where the property is located, that being an important distinction. And it would be okay to also require that the listing broker of the agent requesting access have to sign the lockbox agreement so that the broker or the principal broker understands the obligations and rules around such access. Okay, so as I said, so I didn't say this yet, but it is a good point to leave on the lockbox issue, is that, again, this lockbox issue I've gleaned is going to be a big change for a lot of associations and MLSs. In some areas, I've heard maybe that they don't even allow other Realtor members to get that access if they're not a member of that association. That kind of activity is prohibited through the Board of Choice rules regardless. But in any event, Article 3, there is a duty to cooperate. So Article 3 requires that all Realtors cooperate with other brokers when it's in the best interest of their client. That would require that the Realtor make a determination as to whether or not allowing a non-Realtor to show a property is in, if they have a really enabled buyer, is in the buyer's best or the seller's best interest. That evaluation needs to be made at the point that the request is made so that you can ensure you're always responding to your client's most recent needs and concerns and interests, to be precise. Okay, so the next steps are no immediate action required, as I already said. We're working on the final wording, the final rules. We are meeting with members, associations, MLSs frequently to relay where we are, as I just did, and to seek and solicit feedback as we move into the next steps, because sometime in the spring, We will have a board of directors meeting. We want to make to approve the final rules, and we want to make sure that those rules, that those directors are very well informed on what the potential the changes will be. So for all resources related to this settlement, please check out the website, nar.realtor. If you actually just go to the homepage, this specific topic page will be one of the options that you can access right off the bat and always access as a condition of our settlement for the next year from our homepage. So we will keep that updated, and I'll also continue to share information on the hub. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to move into a couple other lawsuits that you all may be interested in. Specifically, the second bullet point, Sitzer versus the National Association of Realtors. Just a reminder that both of these cases are class action lawsuits, the plaintiffs being a purported class of home sellers who allege that that they overpaid in their commissions to their listing broker, and that is the fault of NAR's rule requiring an offer of compensation to be made through the MLS. From the beginning, we have argued, and we will continue to argue, that the lawsuits are wrong on the facts, wrong on the economics, and wrong on the law. They continue to mischaracterize how the MLS works, and certainly how home buyers and sellers benefit from the efficient, transparent, and accurate system and cooperative system that the MLS creates. So we are actively defending that lawsuit where we are. And so in addition to NAR being a defendant, you may know that there are 4 corporate defendants: Realogy, Remax, Home Services of America, and Keller Williams. We are all defending both of these lawsuits. And the Sitzer lawsuit is actually further along than the Merle lawsuit in Illinois. And in Sitzer, it is contained in Missouri. So the Sitzer lawsuit is specifically alleging that it is home sellers who sold their home using one of 4 MLSs in Missouri for the past 5 years, that they are the ones who have been damaged by our rule. And this was implemented 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago, they filed suit. We are just now at the stage where they are going to be filing for class certification. It's looking like it'll be in the spring that they'll be filing a motion to certify a class. We will be filing a very strong motion to deny class certification, arguing that the transactions are unique and there's not enough typicality or similarity between the transactions in order to satisfy the class requirements. We hope to prevail, because that would be taking the wind out of the sails for these 10 class action lawsuits who have brought, or law firms that have brought these lawsuits. So keep your fingers crossed on that. In the meantime, you may know that your MLSs, 4 MLSs in Missouri, and some of your broker colleagues have received subpoenas to provide information to both the plaintiffs and the defendants that we are now culling and trying to use to our benefit to prove our case. We ask that you do these very simple things to help us win, and that is help us win in the court of public opinion by educating consumers on your value and the value of the MLS. You bring great value to the transaction. Part of this lawsuit is based on a perception that buyers' representatives don't do anything because the properties are now available on the internet. So educating your client on the value you're bringing is going to be key to all of our success and relevancy for years and years to come. Very quickly, 2 clear cooperation lawsuits we're defending in California. They're going very well, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them because I expect them to be dismissed soon. But just so you're aware, after the clear cooperation policy went into effect last May, 2 private listing networks, the Top Agent Network and the PrivateListingService.com, sued NAR in California state courts. And they alleged that the rule itself was anti-competitive because it hurt their business models. that's not how the antitrust laws work. And so we're off to a good start. And our first motion to dismiss was granted. The court did allow Top Agent Network to refile. Both parties have tried to enjoin our rule. Both of those requests were denied. And so now we are still in the motion to dismiss phase, and we'll be filing renewed motions very soon in both cases. So for your information and benefit, the clear cooperation policy is still in effect, going strong. And if you have any questions about that, please check out our website, nar.realtor. We have a plethora of CCP resources and FAQs that could help you. Okay, I see I only have a couple minutes left, so I am just very briefly going to touch on the realtor rights issue that I saw in your what keeps me up, or what's going to have the greatest impact on my business survey. Quite simply, as you know, the Professional Standards Committee recommended to the Board of Directors, and the Board of Directors approved a change to our Code of Ethics this November that prohibits the use of hate speech in any context by realtors. And that was monumental, but it was intended to address and flow through the obligation to provide equal services to all people, thus to adhere to the fair housing law by not denying any services or participating in any agreement to deny services or treat unequally people based on race, gender, any of the protected classes in Article 10 or in the Fair Housing Act. So to the point of rights, I would just say, I put this quote in here as it's a good quote from Lyndon B. Johnson when he signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He said, "The purpose of this law is simple. It does not restrict the freedom of any American so long as he respects the rights of others." So you can analogize that here and say that the rule change does not restrict the freedom of any realtor so long as he respects the humanity of others, the dignity of others, the equality of others. And that is the intent of the rule change. We have a plethora, again, I seem to like that word today, of resources on nar.realtor. So instead of diving too deep in here, I am going to share this slide deck with John Seabury so he can distribute it if you want it. But come to this resource page so that you do know, if you go to our website, there's so much useful information that's delivered in a really easily understandable way that is better and more useful and more productive to read than some of the media outlets are characterizing this rule. So if you have any doubts or question about this rule, first, please watch one of the many training videos that are on this website to get educated on its impact and effect. And as always, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on my team to discuss any concerns or implementation issues that you may have. So with that,
Perfect. Katie, thank you so much. First, I have to say I love that Lyndon Johnson quote. Secondly, I have to ask, were you on our candidate forum live today? Because the word plethora came up a few times in that forum as well, so it was perfect timing. And I don't actually think you were there. Now, quickly, before we let you go, again, thank you for all the information you shared. I'm going to defer to John because we did have a couple questions in the chat, and so I'm going to let him ask those of you.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
There were just a couple of questions, and as a reminder, in case anyone missed it at the beginning, if you're here in person or online, you can go to the main page of the January Business Conference site and ask questions in the chat. We have 3. The first one is the easiest, and it's not even for you. Is this being recorded? Yes, it is. It's being recorded, and it will be posted as soon as it's final on our SBC schedule page, where we've put all of the recordings from the previous meetings up to this point. I'm going to take the last question first because it's the most recent thing you talked about. The last thing you talked about, this person is saying that it should only apply to real estate activities as was originally stated, not all activities.
That is definitely an opinion and perspective heard and debated at every level of the conversation. This is the prohibition on hate speech, again, with the intent being to address the requirement to provide fair housing and fair service and equal services to all people, is the only instance that applies to outside of real estate transactions, really. And so I hear you. Your opinion was very well articulated and debated throughout the process.
So that was more a statement than a question. Back to the very beginning topic that you talked about, the question is, will it require a listing agent to disclose their portion of compensation?
Good question, and I should make clear going forward, no, definitely not. I know that seems kind of weird, but the amount negotiated between the listing broker and the client should be individual, unique, and kept only between the listing broker and the client. Sharing it would be problematic under the antitrust laws. So now you're wondering why, because that could lead toward an agreement of fixing it at a certain level. And then you're thinking, well, why would you share the offer? Well, you're already sharing the offer. The nature of our system has you sharing that offer of compensation with the people, with the competitors who could potentially, act in anti-competitive ways. So therefore, the cure for that, in the eyes of the DOJ, is to also share it with consumers.
Katie, can you hear me? Okay, Katie, I have a quick question on timing. I know originally when this came out, you said that you should have some sort of resolution with DOJ by mid-January, which is, of course, now. And, of course, you said it's got to be voted on by the Board of Directors. When can we expect that you'll have something worked out with them to present to the Board of Directors, and will they hear it first, or will it be disseminated to all the members?
Very good question and very astute observation, and you read closely. My very first communication said we did think that maybe we would be able to be voting on this stuff in January. Things change. Right now, there's nobody in the front office at the Department of Justice because the administration has turned over and they're filling those positions. So it is going to take longer than we thought to finalize the matter. I expect spring. Certainly not before, it could be as early as March, and it could be the regularly scheduled May meeting. The directors will know first about anything happening in this regard. And then, of course, wanting to keep the membership apprised of everything as well, we would share it with the membership as appropriate as well.
And before we let you go, two final questions that are related to lockboxes. It appears, if I recognize the names, both are from local associations. One, clarification on temporary code on lockboxes. If an association offers lockbox key subscription to non-realtors, do we have to offer temporary codes? And the second question, how can we hold a real estate licensee accountable regarding the lockbox rule? A member we can suspend for non-payment of a fine.
So to address the first question, well, let me address the second one because that's what's in my head. Then I have to remember what the first one is. The second one, yes, the same accountability, and those mechanisms can and should be articulated in the lockbox agreement that you provide to the non-member. So if they don't pay a fine, then they don't get access because that's what your agreement has. So it will be a contractual relationship, and that they'll have to adhere to. The first question is about temporary codes. That's a good question. The end result is that they're getting the ability to access the lockbox if the seller approves. And so if they have that ability without a temporary code, that should be sufficient. Given that both of the providers allow for temporary codes and that you're able to, charge a fee, process them, I don't know if not having that option is even beneficial to the association. So it's not a clear answer, but the intent is that the access be provided, and if you're providing it, that should satisfy.
Wonderful. Katie, thank you again for being with us today. We really appreciate your time and all the information you were able to provide to us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye. Now it's my pleasure of once again introducing my co-host, Daryl Burns, and I'm going to invite him to the podium for our next introduction.
Thank you, Jennifer and Katie, for getting us started with this. We have a myriad of seemingly pressing issues, very pressing issues, confronting our industry now, and we appreciate that Katie provided some insights to us. I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Jessica Lautz, who is the Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights at the National Association of Realtors. The core of her research focuses on analyzing trends for both NAR members and housing consumers. Through management of surveys, focus groups, and data analysis, she presents new and innovative ways to showcase results, just as she has done with major media outlets and through international presentations. Jessica will discuss some of her most recent research findings. Economists are great historians. Let's hope Jessica can use her statistics to provide an accurate expectation for the year ahead for us. Jessica was last in St. Louis. It was actually a year ago in January, this year, or a year ago, January, for the St. Louis, and I believe she's also in St. Charles for our economic forecast breakfast. Missouri Realtors offer you a warm welcome back, Jessica.
Thank you so much. It's crazy what a year will do, right? So I took a look at your survey results, and I think every other word was inventory. Where in the world is the inventory? I got to tell you, I don't know where it is either. So I think I can be pretty accurate in saying that we don't have enough inventory. Housing starts were released this morning. There's some indication that builders are ramping up, but we know the headwinds that they have of having labor issues, of having land constraints, of having supply constraints when it comes to steel and lumber are actually just getting worse. So I've heard from home builders and from their chief economist, Robert Dietz, that now they're having concrete issues, and now they're having kitchen appliance issues, which I think we all know about if we have had a broken appliance in our house or know of a friend who has. Just the idea of getting a new refrigerator right now is near impossible. But there's also massive issues with COVID and all of the delays in the process. So just thinking about having people in a home and building a new home is posing a lot of constraints. When we think about the exposure that people have, and people needed to take off time of work as well, and being such essential employees to the process of physically needing to be there and not able to work from home. We also know that there are a lot of concerns for existing homes to list them on the market. People don't want other people in their homes right now. And as much as the transaction has moved into this virtual world and people are using these virtual tours and virtual listings and virtual open houses, people still feel very uncomfortable just having limited people in their home, even spacing it out, even with doors and windows open, even in the cold of winter. There's a lot of fear about that. So we have no inventory. I don't know that I have a silver bullet of when things are going to start looking up. Hopefully, based on today's numbers, we can start seeing that builders will start ramping up. But in all honesty, we're going to need about 18 months of the ramping up of inventory, of solid building, of affordable inventory for us really to start meeting the needs of the current population, let alone a lot of Americans are doubling up right now. So thinking about all of those young adults who may want to leave the home, and really they're doubling up at unprecedented rates right now. So let me jump in. I have to say a lot of America is feeling the pressure cooker. We're feeling the pressure cooker right now of young kids in the home, homeschooling, of young adults going to college online or changing their college plans. But we're also just feeling the pressure of working from home and just having all of the stresses all around us. I will say I am in an attached townhouse right now. I do not have construction going on in my house at this current moment. My neighbor right next door does. So if it starts getting really loud, it is not me. I would tell them to please be quiet, but I cannot because it is not my house. So yes, we all feel all of the pressures right now. I'm going to go over some national data here. A lot of it you may know already. And then I'm going to jump into some Missouri data because I do think it's really a pretty astronomical time right now. And it's good to look at the local data as well as the national picture. What we're seeing right now is we actually have the highest home sales in the last 14 years. We're talking about a time that we haven't seen since the Great Recession, since before the Great Recession, looking at the boom years, where we really do have very strong home sales right now. And a lot of that is driven by the need for more space, more room, more work from home room, Zoom rooms. We need that space right now as we're all home a lot more than we ever expected to be. And with that, what we're seeing is that really low inventory. We're also seeing a lot of people purchasing second homes right now outside of city centers or looking at more affordable markets. Early retirement purchases really driving up that trend. And so that's really putting that pressure on the inventory, but it's also really driving up prices on a very, very large scale of more than 100 months of year-over-year home price increases. In fact, in all 181 markets that we track, we actually have seen year-over-year home price growth. That truly is an unprecedented thing to imagine, of just knowing that it is in all of the MSAs that we track. And with that, we have the lowest typical time on market of 21 days. We're actually reporting this on a monthly basis, but we're reporting it on a weekly basis too. Our weekly housing market monitor released every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. We're actually showing this dip down into the teens in some of the weeks, which is crazy to think that homes are moving on a national scale that quickly. We have 2.3 months of a supply on a national scale. Again, looking at historic lows, but the real supply, this is actually an inflated number because this includes pending contracts. So we're actually talking about less than 1 month supply in many, many areas of the country. And this is not just your traditional areas that have always had very strong growth, because people are looking outside of city centers because they suddenly can work remote on a permanent basis with their career and keep that job. So this really is changing much of the market on a nationwide scale. So let's jump into some of the reasons why. We're doing a survey. It's called Back to Normal Barometer. It's very, very cool because we can look at different flashpoints through COVID. And what we can actually see is that more than 70% of Americans are actually saying that I have either gone to an open house recently or I would feel like this is a very safe activity. Now, this survey is done with a bunch of other industries, thinking about going to the grocery store, going on a cruise ship, going to a conference. And what we see is that people are saying that real estate is actually one of the safest activities that they feel comfortable doing, because we know this is an independent activity. And this is something where realtors have really kept those safety precautions up and made sure that this is a safe activity. And when we're looking at actual home tours, what we see is that outside of the open house is that more than 80% actually have done this recently, or they're ready to go. They don't feel like this is something where they need extra precautions taken. The vast majority of individuals do feel like this is a safe activity. And this is really driving that home sales rebound and that real big push in home sales and that double-digit price increase that we're seeing on a year-over-year basis consistently in the data. What we're seeing in your local market and what we have done recently is that we know that interest rates are at these historic lows. So that gives you more buying power, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. That suddenly gives you a bigger house that you can buy, more square footage. But we also know that that's coupled with these rising home prices. So what we did is we actually took a look on a metro level and we said, okay, what is the price growth? But then also couple that with these new low interest rates. And what does this actually mean for buyers today? And I think this is where we're seeing a lot of this ramped up demand, is that yes, in St. Louis County, when we look Q3 to Q3, we do see that home prices, and I took the largest counties that I could find population-wise in your state. And so St. Louis County, prices increased 3.1%, but with the lower interest rates, you could actually have a payment that is $88 lower. And so you can see similar patterns here when you look at Jackson County. Very big price increases here, 5.2%, but you're actually paying less on a monthly basis. So you can actually play around with these links. I supplied them here so you can look at your local county. We have all the major counties in Missouri, and you can play around with the data here. And you can play around with what that interest rate is as that does change. So please do check out this website. We're building all of the state and local data because we do understand how important it is to have this local data. The other thing that we have is a work from home report. And what we found is that in St. Charles, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Plate County and Clay County, what we have seen is that you guys actually have more employees who are working from home. And this is actually a really high share in Missouri, and I'll give you some more local data here. When we look at the census data, and they're doing this weekly survey that's really, really cool. It's every other week. And what they're seeing is that 37% of the Missouri workforce is actually working from home. It actually has one adult in that household who is working from home. And typically they worked in person before. That's a very, very large share. When we look at the national scale, we actually see about a quarter of the workforce is working from home right now. So again, higher in Missouri. But also when we looked pre-pandemic, what we saw is about 11-12% of the workforce was working from home. So you're looking at about 3 times that share. That's pretty impressive to see that. So there's a lot of reliance on good broadband access, a lot of reliance on having Zoom rooms, a lot of reliance on good technology within that home, but also that space to be able to do it. One of the other things that I want to talk about, though, is that while real estate is doing well and seeing that very steep recovery of people saying it's safe, a lot of home sales, more than 20% increase on a year-over-year basis consistently in recent months, is that we unfortunately have a lot of Americans who can't work from home, who are seeing a loss of employment income. And so this is what we talk about when we talk about this K-shaped recovery. So those who are recovering, and then those who unfortunately are not recovering and are really, really struggling right now. And what we're seeing is that just in your state, these are state level data, what we do see is that nearly a quarter of the state does expect to have a loss of employment income in the next 4 weeks. We also know that this is coupled with people thinking that it would be very difficult to pay their usual household expenses. So thinking about utility costs, thinking about groceries, also feeding into this, 12% are saying that they have food scarcity within their household. They didn't have enough to eat in the last 2 weeks. So really thinking about some difficulties that individuals are having within the state. The other thing that we know is this is affecting the ability to pay rent, to make mortgage payments, and what the future holds for these individuals. And so we do see here, and this has been tracking up on a nationwide level. Census has been doing this data for a number of months now, and you can actually play around with this on a map. You can see state level data, and you can see how it has tracked over time. So I would encourage you, if you are interested, to play around with this. It's pretty discouraging. There's a lot of Americans who really, really are struggling right now. All right. Now bring it back up. That was a pretty difficult slide to go through, but I do think it's a good thing to just be aware of what is going on in the larger sense. All right, so let's take a look at some of these changes that are happening for home buyers today, because we really, really are seeing some changes. We do the profile of home buyers and sellers on an annual basis. We've been doing it since 1981. And we actually this year were able to divide out buyers who actually purchased before the pandemic and then those who purchased during the pandemic. It's crazy. There are some very big changes. Now, again, when we talk about that K-shaped recovery, what we can see here is that people who have higher incomes are more likely to be in that housing market today. They can purchase these higher price point homes. They can actually navigate that housing market when there is multiple bids on that property. And these buyers are the ones who are active. When we look at homes that are more than $500,000 that were purchased during the pandemic, what we saw is they jumped from a share that was in the teens to nearly a quarter of homes that were purchased during the pandemic were over $500,000. So again, very, very well-heeled buyers able to compete in this environment. The other thing that we're seeing is that buyers are purchasing a home that's good for right now. They're not necessarily saying this is my forever home. They're not necessarily saying I'm going to live here forever, but they're saying my median expected time when we look at all this data is 10 years versus 15 years for pre-pandemic buyers. I think that really speaks to buyers saying, I have to get out of this current living situation. This may not be my be all end all, but it has to fit my current family right now. The other thing we're seeing is a lot of people are moving farther distances. They're at least moving to farther out suburbs. We've actually tracked this data using post office data. We actually did a Freedom of Information Act to be able to get the data from the post office. Very cool to be able to do that. And what we were able to see is, yes, people are moving farther out. It's not a surprise. The number one reason to sell today is just for more space. And so what we're seeing is that people are actually feeling wary about jumping on a flight, but they're buying a home sight unseen. We had no reason to track this data pre-pandemic. We really had no reason to track it at all. But when we looked at this during the pandemic, what we did see is that 1 in 20 buyers did put a contract down, purchase that home without physically seeing that home. That's a lot of reliance on that realtor in that transaction to really make sure that they're showing them the neighborhood, the home, more than they can find on Google Maps, really showing them that home virtually. The other thing that we're seeing is that people are being very strategic in the homes they're walking through. Now, a lot of this has to do with competition. You have to be strategic with that lack of inventory, narrowing the homes that you're seeing. We're very much seeing this in the data. It actually went down to a median of 3 at one point early in the pandemic of people saying, you know what, I'm going to put an offer down after seeing 3 homes. It's like an HGTV dream. You wouldn't have expected it in the past because people traditionally had been walking through 10 to 12 homes in the past 2 years. So really, we had been seeing a lot of narrowing of those homes being seen. Let me jump into some demographic changes that we're seeing, and they're big. What we're seeing here is that there is a massive ramp up in purchasing of multi-generational homes. It has increased to 1 in 6 buyers during COVID purchasing a multi-generational home. Very big jump. We've been tracking this data for a number of years now. It's been consistently 11, 12%, bouncing around there. Very low. It's sizable, but it's not that much. And we hadn't seen an increase. To see it jump to 15%, that's an increase in just a few months. The number one reason is aging parents moving into that home. So thinking about perhaps someone who's living in a senior center, assisted living, individually now living in that family member's home. Now, there's some pretty big implications here for the housing stock. Is it going to be able to accommodate safety concerns within that home? Thinking about wider hallways, wider doorways, guardrails, and bathrooms, things like this. Is the housing stock be able to accommodate that? I don't know. The other big thing that we saw a big jump in the reason why for multi-generational homes is actually cost savings. It's pooling incomes among multiple adults earning incomes and saying, you know what, this is my fallback plan. Maybe it's junior, maybe it's my parent, maybe it's my sibling, but somehow this adult who I wouldn't traditionally be living with is my financial fallback plan. It's a good way to buy a bigger home, but it also is what a lot of people are doing right now. The other big thing that we're seeing is that we actually have the largest share of young adults who are in their teens to mid-20s who are actually living at home since the Great Depression. 52% of young adults are living at home. This is the highest share that we've recorded in recent history. Really, really high share of young adults at home. Now, it's not a driving reason to purchase a multi-generational home. A lot of that could be is that was their childhood bedroom. They're just moving back into it, or perhaps into a home that has enough room to accommodate them. But again, a very big reason on the greater spectrum of why people are buying these multi-generational homes. Lots of reasons behind that. College went online. In fact, 70% of Missourians who were in those college age range changed their college plans because of COVID. So we are seeing a lot of changes that way, but also a lot of young adults lost their jobs, and a lot of people saying, you know what, I'm going to move out of this expensive apartment that I'm renting, move back home with mom and dad during COVID. At least I can quarantine, live with people right now, as opposed to living individually and paying that high rent, especially when I can work virtually. The other big change that we're seeing here is a massive baby bust. Now, I know I'll probably get some argument here because I know if you look around, a few of your friends are probably having babies because we're hitting that 10 months of being in the pandemic. Now, I will say, though, on a national scale, when we look at the data, what the census is reporting, what other countries are reporting is that we are seeing a contraction in birth in this country. And this has been a very long time coming. This has been happening for a number of years. It's more than a 30-year low in birth rates in the country. It really is a continuation of a past trend. But a lot of this has to do with finances. A lot of it has to do with the massive exodus of working women in the workforce right now. A lot of women stepping away and saying, you know what, I can't do it. I can't homeschool my kids, Zoom school my kids, watch them with no daycare and work at the same time. I just can't do it. So they're stepping out of the workforce. So adding on additional children into that family situation, or as a woman thinking about going to a hospital and having a birth right now without being able to have your partner or your spouse in that room, probably very, very difficult for a lot of women to fathom. So we are seeing this continual drop in birth rates. Again, a continuation of a past trend, but an acceleration of a past trend that we hadn't been seeing. What I'm showing you on this chart is that when we look back at the 1980s, 58% of home buyers did have a child in their home. Today, it's just a third. And so we are seeing this continual drop. And there's a lot of implications for housing, the space you need, the location, and what goes into that for home buyers when so few of them today do have children under the age of 18 that they're accommodating. More likely to have an aging adult in their home, probably more likely that way than you are to have a child in your home. So really thinking about some big implications here for the space that's needed when we do have this growing share of adults in homes versus this growing share, this shrinking share of children. All right, we are seeing absolutely a clearing of shelters. If you're trying to adopt a dog right now, a cat right now, good luck. You're not going to find them. You can't find inventory for homes, but you certainly can't find animals right now. Really crazy reports in that in the last year, home prices gone up 12%, 13%. The highest that they've gone up is in one area in Connecticut where they've actually gone up, I think, 27% in the last year, Greenwich, Connecticut. That's crazy. That's a huge increase in home prices in that area. But if you think of the cost of a dog, the cost of a dog has gone up 150% in the last year. That is insanity. That dog will destroy your furniture and your rug, and people are paying 150% more for companionship right now. Something to do with kids. It is crazy. When you think of the cost of a cat, that's also gone up, and that cat will destroy your furniture. I have 4 of them, and they absolutely destroy it. Lots of spray bottles in my house. The cost of a cat has gone up nearly 50% in the last year. So a lot of people paying for pets right now. And this is a huge driver of people choosing where they're going to live, the space they need in their home, the features they need in their home, that fenced yard, the wide windowsills, big windows for these cats and dogs. And people really are choosing this as a driver to have these amenities, to have HOAs be able to accommodate these pets. The other big change that we are continuing to see is a drop in marriage rates in the country. Census has reported this data in the last month. They've come up with it and said we are continuing to see a drop in marriage rates. People really stepping away from the institution, not having money to do it, doing it at a later age. And so we're seeing this drop in marriage overall. When we look back at the 1960s overall with marriage rates, what we do see is that back in the 1960s, more than 70% of American adults were married. Today, just half are married. And again, that's a shrinking share of people who are married and are getting divorced. What we do see is this mirrors the first-time homebuyer trend. We also see a shrinking share of first-time homebuyers who are married. And we see that that has dropped as well from 75% back in the 80s to just 52% now, continuing to drop on an annual basis. What we see in making up that difference, we see a growth, especially in the pandemic, and I don't have those numbers in front of you, but we're especially seeing a growth in roommates purchasing homes. We're seeing a growth in single women purchasing homes, but unfortunately it's a shrinking share. There's a lot of reasons behind that affordability playing in, single females having less income, really playing into that as well. So people are pulling money in different ways. Unmarried couples growing, roommates growing. They're not necessarily in this legal institution, but they're saying, you know what, I want to purchase, make this big financial purchase together. I'm not an attorney, but I would advise probably some sort of legal agreement needs to be in place that people are contributing different down payments, earning different rates of equity, what happens when that relationship dissolves. Lots of implications there for housing when we see these really big shares jumping, especially during the pandemic. Really, really interesting phenomenon that's going on there. All right, so another trend that we're seeing is that first-time homebuyers have dropped off. We're continuing to see this drop off. That 50% mark, that was the first-time homebuyer tax credit. It was between $8,000 and $10,000 during the Great Recession. It pushed a lot of first-time homebuyers into homeownership. There is talk right now, fodder right now, that Biden could have this $15,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit. It's great for first-time homebuyers, but where's the inventory? And I think that's the big question, right? Is where is the inventory? We really have a lot of demand right now for housing. We do not lack demand. So that's going to be very, very interesting of where those first-time homebuyers would go if that money is pumped in for first-time homebuyers. I don't know. It's a big question. What we have seen is this continual drop-off last year of this 31% of first-time homebuyers. We have seen this share really shrinking, and there's some data behind this. Some of it, I think, is the rising age of first-time homebuyers. They have risen to an all-time high of 33. And so I think this feeds into bear with me here for a second. Last year, what we saw is that a third of first-time homebuyers had down payment assistance from friends or family. Last year, it shrunk to a quarter. I do think it gets a little uncomfortable as you rise in your 30s to get mom and dad's help for a down payment. So I think that's one of the reasons why. I think a lot of family members couldn't really tap in and say financially, I feel secure giving Junior a big cash down payment right now, given the pandemic. So I think that feeds into that shrinking share as well. I also am seeing in the data that there's a smaller share last year, at least before the pandemic, of young adults who are living at home and moving directly into homeownership. That used to be a huge leg up. In recent years, it has been. Now, with 52% of young adults living at home, maybe what we'll see is in the next year, that gave them the ability post-COVID to be able to purchase a home and really be able to save for that down payment when they didn't have rent payments. Maybe that allows them to pay down their student loan debt, get their finances in order, and be able to enter homeownership. I don't know, but I think that's a big question mark for what we will see. The other big thing we're seeing here is that sellers are in a rush. I only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Sellers in a rush. They are offering incentives just to get out of their home when they know that they need to remodel because they don't want to bring a contractor and you can't find one anyway. Good luck with that. So they're having credits for remodeling, home warranties that they're offering, but they're well heeled. They have more money. They have more equity in their homes. They're selling at this higher price point. They're making these small price concessions, but basically because they're financially able to do that. We also see this big ramp up again in virtual tours using the virtual technology. And I'm sure the share is higher than 27% at this point. In all honesty, this was earlier in the pandemic, so I'm sure that these shares are even higher now. The other big thing that we are seeing is that buyer use of agents at 88%, a lot of people using agents right now, really feeling very confident that they want an agent by their side. This is especially true of younger buyers. But I have to say that if you're a repeat buyer in the market, you haven't done this in 10 years, that's the median tenure of home sellers. And so they were essentially a first-time home buyer too. There's a lot of angst right now, and having that representation on your side is really, really important to buyers to help them negotiate the terms, to help them find that right home, to really help them navigate that neighborhood and what's the next step in the transaction, especially with all the anxiety that all of us are feeling right now. The other thing that we're seeing is that sellers want a full service agent. We're seeing nearly an all-time high of 89% of sellers using an agent in their transaction. And we ask, do you want a broad range full service agent, or do you want someone who just lists on the MLS? And wanting a broad range full service agent is actually higher than we have reported historically. So really, they want someone who's going to use them from all aspects, from day one, before they list their home, all the way to the closing table. They want someone who's going to be by their side. The other thing that we're seeing is that we collected data on iBuyers, and it's actually less than 1%. It was 0%. There is no 0%, but there's less than 1% of people who used an iBuyer in their transaction last year. People don't want to just do this and take a big price concession and be able to feel okay with doing that. They really do want representation to be able to market their home and find a qualified buyer. Only 8% of sellers actually sold via FSBO last year, so people not using that as a way to sell homes. And when we look back at the 80s, early 90s, what we did see is 1 in 5 were using this FSBO to sell via FSBO. We just don't see it today. People not feeling comfortable doing that. So what's next? I don't know. I think we have a lot of questions here. I think interest rates are expected to stay low as we look forward into 2021. There is no indication that is my timer, that is going to slow down. We also do expect that home sales will continue to be very steady. A lot of demand in the pipeline. A lot of people who have missed out on finding that perfect home are waiting for that inventory to come into the market. We're hearing a lot of reports anecdotally from realtors saying the spring market traditionally has been starting in February even, but now it's even starting now. It's in the middle of winter, and we're still seeing a lot of demand right now. Also, I think that there's some big questions here. Yes, McMansions, people want these bigger homes, but maybe they just need the space. They need less density. They don't want to be an attached townhouse with someone doing construction right next to them. And they would actually even go for a tiny home on land just to be able to have the space. We're seeing a lot of people buy vacation homes. If they have good broadband access, what's keeping it from buying their primary home? I think that's a huge question. We're already seeing early retirement purchases with interest rates this low. People saying retirement's 15 years off, but I'm never going to be able to afford this the way I can now. So why don't I take advantage of it? I can even stay there for a month right now while I'm going remote for work. How does schools come into play? Huge question mark for families right now. Still more than half of school kids are going online. They're doing Zoom school. So how does that work going into the future? And then are we going to see this drop in tenure? We obviously saw a lot of buyers say, I just need a home that's good for right now. In the past, when we look back at this data, people used to move every 6 to 7 years. It's gone to an all-time high of 10 years right now. And the reasons why people used to move is because life changes happened. They got married, they got divorced, they had a baby, and we're seeing all of those trends go down on a very broad scale. Marriage rates go down, birth rates go down, divorce rates go down. So I think the pandemic is one of those things that really has changed things that will bring tenure down. But I think this is one that we're going to have to watch because we haven't seen it yet in the data. Do follow us. The profile of home buyers and sellers is free right now. So that's huge. Absolutely take advantage of it. We typically charge for that report, but go and check it out on Right Tools right now. You can get it for free. Thank you so much.
Jessica, real quick. You know, in Missouri, of course, we have a lot of vacation area, and there's an uptick in vacation homes or second homes. Some people are just moving to the country, going to central Missouri or southwest Missouri. So we know that affects inventory because, you know, that's greater demand. But one thing you didn't talk about, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what the effect is. We have all these institutional investors and funds with a lot of money. They're buying single-family residences to boost their portfolio to rent. In fact, their demand is so great that they buy new construction even. So can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, so the investor share is an interesting one because we've seen that renters have struggled paying their rent in recent months. And so we've actually seen at least the mom and pop investors have taken a step back. We're seeing that people are buying these vacation homes. They're willing to probably Airbnb or VRBO it, but not necessarily on a large scale of just pure investors. That being said, I think it'll be interesting moving forward because interest rates are low. And if you can charge the rent and have a renter who will pay that rent, it'll be interesting to see. Now that competition is going to be worse for first-time home buyers, especially if we see a huge share of first-time home buyers move in with this first-time home buyer tax credit. That could be very, very, very difficult moving forward to really find that perfect home. And especially seeing those survey results that every other word was inventory, I think that could be very difficult.
Jessica, thank you very much. We really appreciate all the information, the research, the analysis of the trends. Before we let you go, though, I'm going to turn over to John because I know we have at least one question in the chat for you.
Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
What do you see with competitive bids where prices went well over asking? Any concerns that in 2 years, will they be able to sell at the same price point, value versus competitive buying situations?
Yeah, so I guess you're probably asking, are we seeing this price bubble right now, or are we seeing that bubbleishness? We're not. So we do see that the buyers who are coming in, they're having a multiple bid situation in so many areas of the country, and it's obviously happening in your area as well. But home prices continue to rise on a double-digit basis, on a year-over-year basis. So we're continuing to see this consistently. And there's really not much slowing down of this. And interest rates are low. And the lending that is happening is very, very tight for buyers to be able to enter. So they have to be a qualified buyer to be able to enter in this market. It's not like those no-doc loans that we had seen in years past.
Great, thank you so much. And just as a reminder, or actually to let Jessica know, our in-audience here, I've seen lots of them taking pictures of your slides, so thank you very much. I think you provided some wonderful resources for us to go back to. So for everybody here in person and live streaming, remember, this is taped, so you can go back and pull that information to do some of your research on your own counties. Again, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, now, as we all know, that there's been so much focus on what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. Before we get to our special advocacy speaker this afternoon, though, we do have a special taped message from Congressman Cleaver from Missouri's 5th Congressional District.
Hello, This is Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to talk with you about what we are hoping to get done in the 117th Congress. As you may know, as you clearly know, things are rather disruptive in Washington right now. We all have even difficulty getting out of the Capitol to our apartments or frankly getting from one location to the other. There are 22,000 troops around the Capitol. Some of the issues that we're going to deal with immediately, this rental issue is not something that can wait. And it's not just helping the renters, but it helps the small landlords. They are going without payments. And so if we don't do something, we're going to have the masses of people ousted from those rental units. On December 21st, of course, that's the last Congress, we passed this emergency housing assistance for vulnerable Americans. And that has been able to keep families from being displaced, and it has provided some emergency relief for some of the small housing providers. The emergency relief included a provision that I've led on, frankly, in what was called the HEROES Act, the HEROES package, and that was a legislative vehicle that carried $25 billion in emergency rental assistance. I'm going to be doing that again. Keep in mind that all legislation that was not approved before the new Congress was sworn in has to be introduced to the new Congress. In other words, if I introduce legislation to the 116th Congress, it dies immediately when this Congress goes out. So all of this will have to be reintroduced, and I think there is, of course, interest in doing it. One of the things that's important, at least for me, is that $25 billion of the money that we've set aside will come to Missouri, and so I think that we're trying to take care of home. One of the things that I'm thanking God for is that in all likelihood in 2 weeks I will become the chair of the Housing Committee, the Housing and Insurance Committee. This is the committee I've wanted to chair since I was elected to Congress 16 years ago. This is what I am interested in more than anything else. So I will be in a position to work with you on housing, as I will be working with the chair of the with the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, who very likely is going to be one of my wife's closest friends, Marcia Fudge. She's a good friend of mine too. So I think we'll have people in place with whom we can work on some of the knotty issues that have been plaguing us for a while. And so I'm going to also try to work on some of the structural problems in the housing market, and a housing stock we've got to work with, because it's right now insufficient to meet the existing demand. We have a housing crisis in the United States, but I mean, who knows that better than you? We've got to remove as many of the financing barriers for home buyers as we can possibly do. And then I look forward to getting some of my agenda from my friends in the real estate business. And so I think that over the next couple of years, we should make a lot of progress, and I look forward to working with you. God bless. Happy New Year.
Congratulations to Congressman Cleaver that he will soon be the chair of the Housing Subcommittee in the House of Representatives. Speaking of the U.S. House of Representatives, our final speaker today is Ryan Rusbelt, and I apologize if I pronounce his name wrong. He worked with the U.S. House of Representatives for over 7 years, serving on the staff of the Financial Services Committee, and with members of Congress from New Hampshire and New York. Ryan is now working for us in Washington, D.C. as a federal legislative representative with the National Association of Realtors. On our member survey, at least 1/3 of respondents expressed interest or concern about what effects legislative and regulatory actions from the Biden administration may cause short and long-term, what the effects may be from short and long-term effects to the real estate industry. Ryan, I assume, will address potential changes to the 1031 exchange, capital gains, mortgage interest, and property tax deductions. Thank you for joining us live from the nation's capital to talk about these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate it. You know, as Jessica mentioned in her presentation, working from home is kind of a blessing and a curse. You know, the good thing is you guys can't tell that I'm actually wearing basketball shorts under here, so it's been all good. But I actually have my colleague Jack Greason standing by as well, because I also looked outside and there's a Verizon truck out there. So I don't know what they're going to do with the internet, but he's standing by, you know, just in case. But yeah, obviously, you know, it's an honor to be here to be able to talk with you guys, and it's been great working with your delegation too. As you mentioned, I was a former House Financial Services Committee staffer, where I worked with you know, Chairman Lukemeyer, Mr. Cleaver, Ms. Wagner, former member William Lacey Clay. Just a random thing. A really good friend of mine from high school is actually Ranking Member Graves' deputy staff director. So worked a lot with the Missouri members, and they've been all fantastic. And they're honestly they're great support, and they're really good supporters of Realtor issues. But you know, kind of giving it a little bit of a flavor of what's going on in DC. You guys have the news, you guys see it. It's been obviously been crazy with the transition of power, the runoff and the Senate elections, the changeover of power from the Senates, the freshman orientations, the committee structures. It's been absolutely wild. Been bouncing off the walls. You know, everybody's trying to get their ducks in a row, their policy is all set. And you know, what we saw from yesterday is that the administration plans to move very quickly. You know, on President Biden's first day, we saw 17 executive orders signed into law, or signed into as executive orders, excuse me. And then today he signed additional ones, authorizing the use of the Defense Protection Act, and some more relief to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, one thing to actually point out from yesterday's executive orders, obviously a lot of you probably have seen that the eviction moratorium was actually extended to March 31st. I know we have a lot of opinions on that, and you know, there was a housing coalition which NAR is a part of. We did send a letter to President Biden, asking him not to further extend the eviction moratorium for a long term. You know, we all see the benefits of having mortgage forbearance as an essential tool for short-term financial hardships, but obviously with prolonged forbearance without any additional assistance will obviously still result in a potential foreclosure. At the end of last year, obviously, we knew we were successful in securing $25 billion in rental assistance, which was made into law, along with some additional stimulus checks and expansion of small business rescue programs. I know many of you people that are in the room right now and online virtually also applied for PPP loans, and you know, we're going to try to see more of that come into play in the next weeks, I think, or maybe even days. You know, I was on a call earlier today, and I kind of got a rundown of what the new administrations, what their top priorities are going to be in the next few days. Obviously, you saw today, probably a lot of you haven't seen it, but the president just did a press release just like an hour or two ago, unveiling new COVID standards, you know, mask for 100 days, and trying to get that a little bit more under control. And tomorrow, to my understanding, he's going to be working specifically on economic recovery and economic relief, which I think is going to be where we're going to see that big $1.9 billion COVID relief bill, the additional stimulus, the additional $1,400 that he wants to go out, which that is there is a lot of bipartisan support to try to make sure that that gets that 2,000 mark that was discussed before the new year. So I think that we're going to learn a lot about that tomorrow. I think that the negotiations in the House and the Senate are going to be pretty rigorous on that, but we'll see where that goes. Moving on, another big thing that's going to be on President Biden's agenda and the administration's agenda is the Buy American Innovation. So a big thing, and especially with Missouri having the ranking member Graves on transportation infrastructure, this is a really good opportunity for, our association as a whole, but especially in your state to really, try to work on investments into infrastructure. And I think that's the administration. I think it's a really big thing for the administration. It's been a big topic for the last 3 administrations, but we keep seeing what happens, and politics plays a little bit of a part. But I think that Chairman DeFazio and Ranking Member Graves, at least on the House side, really do want to work together. I think the administration's ready to actually do a big, overhaul infrastructure building, a building plan. So I think we're going to see that in the next coming days. Some other topics, that the administration has been putting out has been, equality, climate. I think climate change is going to be a big thing for them when it comes to working with House Republicans and Democrats to try to find some sort of solution on climate and energy. I think that's going to be a big talking point in the next couple of months as well. Obviously, healthcare, immigration, and a big thing that the administration has been talking about is restoring America's place in the world. So I think that right there is kind of a snapshot of what we're going to probably see for the next few months. On the congressional side of things, as I mentioned earlier, with the changeover of power, the Senate's obviously now at a 50-50 split with Vice President Harris as the tiebreaker. And the margins are super close in the House. I think it's 11 seat difference right now, which is the closest it's been in a while. Our hope is that this will force Congress to work in a more bipartisan fashion. I think that there was a really big push, and in fact, actually, toward the end of last Congress, when we saw that last stimulus bill come through, that was a big to do with the Problem Solvers Caucus. With the Problem Solvers Caucus is the more moderate R's and moderate Democrats coming together and working together to get a more common sense legislation passed through. We ended up seeing more of that centrist group toward the end of the Congress. I think that's going to be a big player coming up in this next Congress, in the 117th Congress. So again, it's going to be a really slim margin, both the House and Senate. I think we're going to see some realistic, hands out, reaching out for bipartisan support. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this all unfolds. Things that we are watching out for legislative priorities. Obviously, the 1031 like-kind exchange. We're hopefully that's going to not have any change. Hopefully, it's going to be all good. We're going to be able to protect that. It's eviction moratorium, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to obviously continue to push for the rental assistance aspect. With the new COVID bill, again, that's going to be hashed out a little bit. So everything I say, please take with a grain of salt. But hopefully that we get more direct checks, state and local funding, which is the new part because there was no state and local funding in the last 5 coronavirus bills that I think totaled about $4 trillion. So getting more state and local funding, money for vaccine distributions, school reopenings, police and healthcare workers, and things like that. I think that's what we're going to see in this big chunk of the next COVID stimulus. So that we get our eyes on that a good amount. As I mentioned earlier, a new infrastructure package that could be coming to the doorstep here shortly. I think it's going to focus on, again, with rates being so low, it's a great time right now to do a big transportation infrastructure package. But I think, from our perspective, broadband's obviously been a huge thing, as, Jessica and was mentioning working from home, and in a lot of areas, in rural areas, there's no access to internet. And that means people that are working, telemedicine, school, all these, things that it's a really big issue that we've been tracking, and I think it's been really gaining a lot of ground on the Hill. And then just with general safety, with roads, bridges, mass transit, and the list goes on. When we were live, I think in San Francisco, one of our realtors stood up and they said, realtors, we don't just sell homes, we sell communities. And we want to ensure that our communities are safe and have all the necessary commodities that are available. And I think that that's a reason why we've been putting so much more effort into infrastructure recently. And that really hit home. And I think that there's going to be a really good chance of an infrastructure package. As we mentioned, tax is going to be, it's going to be a real big focal point. I think the administration's plan is to undo some of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that passed at the beginning of President Trump's first term. One of those could be getting rid of the SALT tax deduction, which is state and local tax deduction. But there's been some talk about, on a bipartisan level, removing the marriage penalty in the SALT tax deduction, where if you look at the standard deduction, how it goes from $12,000 to $1,200 to $2,400, the same thing is $12,000. Wow, I'm all mixed up with my numbers. I apologize. $12,000 to $24,000. It could go from $10,000 on the state and local tax deductions to $20,000 for a married couple. Right now, it's still stuck at that $10,000. So if you are filing as an individual, it's a $10,000 tax break. If you are married, it's still $10,000. It doesn't actually bump up. So there has been talk about that with Republicans and Democrats on both the Senate and the House of trying to fix that. But that's going to be a big talking point in the tax bill. And then also something that we've been really intrigued about is a first-time homebuyer tax credit. That is something that is going to be talked about, I think, moving forward. In fact, there was a couple of bills that were introduced in the last Congress on this. So, that is something where I think that may be brought into a new, bigger package coming forward. But, tax is going to be a huge conversation, I think, going forward. And then one of our favorite issues that seem to never goes away, as a former financial services staffer, this issue has always been looming, is a long-term national flood insurance program reauthorization. We've supported, I think, countless versions of the bill with reforms, with new mapping, with so many different components to it. We've supported a ton of bipartisan bills that have just passed overwhelmingly, and we just seem to not being able to get that over the hump, and that 5-year reauthorization is what we're looking for. And I think that we've got another pretty good shot at it. I think we were really close last year with Congresswoman Maxine Waters and Ranking Member Patrick McHenry had a bill that we supported that we loved, and it just didn't make it over the finish line from time and a couple other things, but it kept getting looped in. But overall, I mean, we're going to see a little bit of a shakeup. I think that the housing industry has made it very clear, that obviously real estate's 1/5 of the U.S. economy. Our lawmakers, they understand this, and I think that they really do want to make sure what they're doing is not going to alter that. And I think they also know that a big part of our industry helped this nation stay afloat during this past year. Buying a home is a direct stimulus to the economy, and I think that when members of Congress and the administration talk about these, they really look at that, and they want to make sure that we're not going to tamper too much with our industry here. So, I mean, that's the best kind of snapshot I think I can provide right now. I know there's probably tons of questions, and I'll tell you right now, if I can't answer them, I apologize, but I promise I'll get back with you one way, shape, or form. But I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments or anything from anyone that may have anything.
Ryan, believe it or not, I don't know that there are any questions in the chat right now. I'll reconfirm that with John. We don't. So, of course, I know that we can always reach out to John. We have the ability to reach out to you guys if we do have questions. So, again, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us from DC.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. Take care.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed the forum as much as I did and what all of our speakers had to say. So once again, I'd really like to thank Katie, Jessica, and Ryan for everything that they brought to us today. We'll be back here again for the next Emerging Issues Forum in April, and at that time, we'll tackle more issues. But remember, the brainstorming and the problem solving, it doesn't just stop here. We don't have to wait until we get together again in April. So please keep those conversations alive on the landing. We do have an emerging issues community there that you can embrace and take on. And of course, there are other communities that you can participate in your conversations and your problem solving. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.